Welcome to Spectral Shadows, where the darkness whispers and the unseen lurks. Tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it? Because horror feels different at night, especially when you're alone. Those who love their mother, like, share, and comment. Subscribe, if you dare. Now turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story number 1. Several months ago, I made the decision to completely blow up my life. Impulsive, yes. Not well thought out either. If you were to ask me why I did it, I'm not sure I would have been able to offer a cogent explanation. I guess I was just feeling trapped, starting to get tired of it all. It was a Monday morning. I was on the metro going to work as usual, but when my stop came, I didn't get up. I remained sitting until the end of the line, arriving in some industrial part of the city I'd never been to. I stood up and walked off the train and onto the platform, breathing in the cool air. I checked the time on my phone, 8:10 a.m. A few minutes later, I got a text from my boss. "Where are you?" A message that would have usually sent me into a panic. But at that moment, I just felt too detached from everything to care. A strange kind of feeling. I guess something in me just snapped. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Going to work and then coming home and studying in the hopes of advancing in a career I couldn't have cared less about. I've been working forever, going to school forever. Always told myself that someday I wouldn't have to anymore. But I'd stopped feeling so sure about that. I made my way out of the station. With the morning rush settled, it was mostly empty. I chose a street at random and began walking until I found a bar. After a few drinks, I was smiling. Not just because of the alcohol, but because it felt like I'd regained some semblance of control. Later that day, I bought a paper map from a dollar store, went home and pinned it to my wall, then closed my eyes and threw a dart at it. First time it landed in the Pacific Ocean. Second time, somewhere in Malaysia. Never been to the country, and so I booked the first flight available and flew out a few days later. I spent a week there. Didn't have an itinerary or a schedule the entire time. Just went wherever the wind would take me. I wandered around, went bar hopping, tried new foods, made new friends. Slowly I could feel my world begin to open up. When I got back to my apartment, I threw another dart. 2 days later, I was on a flight to Sao Paulo, then Montreal. One day I got home and found out I'd been evicted. Wasn't really surprised, and it didn't really matter. I just booked another flight. I looked over my finances and determined that I had enough savings that I'd been planning on using as a down payment someday to keep this going for about another 5 months. Then a risky night in Macau gave me enough for another 3. Of course, I was still wary about what I'd have to deal with when it all ran out. I'd told my family I was just going on vacation, but somehow they'd found out I'd stopped showing up to work. I'd been avoiding picking up their calls, but eventually did so, just so they wouldn't try and file a missing persons report or anything. I explained to them what I'd been doing, and it was like a switch had flipped. Any hint of concern in their voices suddenly melted away, replaced by this tone of annoyance, borderline rage. They told me that I was going to regret this, that I was ruining my life, that if I came to my senses and returned home right now, maybe they could help me pick up the pieces. I just hung up. I considered getting odd jobs in various places, which I did for a while, but then I just stopped caring. I should have been careful, fearful for the future ahead, but I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I was free, completely uninhibited. I just wanted to keep riding the wave. Soon I had visited 22 different countries. I'd made more friends. experienced more in those months than I had in my previous 29 years of life. I didn't want to stop, and I wasn't going to. The Netherlands was my 23rd. One night I left a house party in Rotterdam with a girl in a blue dress. My mind was hazy, under the influence of a cocktail of different substances. I followed her into dense woods, where she supposedly lived. In retrospect, the alarm bells should have been going off. In the moment, I just didn't care. The trees and brush seemed to grow thicker, more hostile the further we went. We walked for a long while, but every time a concern would start to creep into my head, she'd pass me the bottle, give me a look seductive enough to nullify my fears. Even in the darkness, her cold, blue eyes seemed to glisten. Eventually, we arrived at a house in a clearing. I remember entering the place, but not much more afterwards. I woke up the next morning in an empty bedroom. Everything was bathed in a gray, muted light. There was a loud, steady drumming against the windows and the roof. Rainfall. No idea where the hell I was, but the hangover was nasty enough that I didn't immediately question it. I looked around the room. Pretty bare bones. Other than the bed, there was a small dresser, a mirror, 2 paintings on separate walls. The closet was open, revealing nothing inside. The air smelled stale. I could feel traces of dust in my throat and nostrils. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up for a bit. Then I washed my face with cold water, drinking some of it straight from the faucet. Then I laid back down, listening to the rain as I tried to piece together what happened the night prior. Memories of the party came back to me in fragments. The music festival I'd been at before that. The breakfast at the hostel. The girl. The woods. I began looking around for my phone and wallet, relieved to find them on the floor beside the bed, with no cash or cards missing. After my headache had dulled into something manageable, I got out of bed, left the room. The hallway was just as empty, silent, still no sign of anybody. I called out and got nothing back but a strange echo, as if this place was much bigger than what I could see. I checked the other rooms upstairs. Nothing still. Then I went downstairs, and it was the same story. I sat down on the couch and checked my phone to see if I'd taken down a number, somebody I could call. But it didn't seem that way. The last message I received was from some dude I'd met at the festival earlier. Nothing that could have been from the girl in the blue dress. I found it strange just how much faith she must have had in me to leave me in her place alone like this. But I guess it was mostly empty anyways. Not much to steal. And then that cautious part of my brain lit up. What if this wasn't actually her place? What if I'd just been led into a really bad situation? I stood up and raced to the front door, taking a deep sigh of relief when I realized I could open it. The front porch was decorated with a few potted plants and 2 old rocking chairs, white paint peeling off of them. The air outside had a pleasant sweetness to it, something almost calming to breathe in. But the rain was a different story. It was chaotic, oppressive even, pouring harder than I'd ever seen it pouring anywhere before. The ceaseless deluge of droplets smacking the ground, producing a near-deafening wall of noise. I'd never heard about a hurricane hitting the Netherlands, and this didn't seem to be one, because there was no wind. The rain was coming down in a completely straight line. No thunder or lightning either. It was difficult to make out any of the surroundings, though I could still tell I was surrounded by woods. I squinted ahead, eventually spotting the clearing we'd come through. But the idea of venturing out and trying to find my way through the forest in conditions like this sounded god-awful. I decided to go back inside, wait it out. It wouldn't have been so bad if I could just scroll through Instagram or something. But my phone battery was sitting at around only 25%, and I hadn't been able to find a charger. I didn't want to be stuck out here with a dead phone. So I decided to explore the house instead. There really wasn't much to note. If I had to guess when it was built, I'd say maybe 20 years ago. Nothing close to modern, but not exactly ancient feeling either. It actually reminded me of my childhood home in the suburbs. Upstairs, there were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Sounds like a lot of space, but the layout was pretty tight. Not a lot of space between. Making up the downstairs area was a living room, a kitchen, a small laundry room, and then one more room behind a locked wooden door. Could have led down to a basement. Or maybe it was just a closet. Not that I really cared. I just wanted the rain to stop. I didn't know how it was possible, but it only seemed to be ramping up. I checked the weather app, but it claimed that Rotterdam was only partly cloudy, with a 5% chance of precipitation. Nothing about extremely heavy rainfall in the news either. I shook my head, feeling the confusion and frustration beginning to proliferate. This was insane. I went back upstairs, looking through every closet in the hopes of finding a rain jacket, an umbrella, something that could give me a fighting chance. But there was jack shit. I checked the time, 2 past noon. Fuck it, I thought. I'll just try and brave it, see how far I can get. I did find something at least a little bit useful in the kitchen. A full, unopened box of garbage bags. I turned one into a makeshift jacket, using a knife I found in the drawer to cut out head and armholes. Then I fashioned another one into a hood. I used a third to wrap tightly around my phone to minimize any water damage. Then I ventured out, and I didn't get far. The second, there was no longer a roof covering my head. It felt like I was drowning. The bags really didn't do much to help. Every second I was forced to wipe water from my eyes, making it nearly impossible to tell where the hell I was going. The forest floor had turned into a muddy swamp, my shoes pulling up heavy clumps of wet earth after every step. I was cold, uncomfortable, slowly losing my shit. But I was still determined to press forward. That was until I saw the people standing at the edge of the clearing. I had to do a double take. I really hadn't noticed them at first, almost as if they'd just suddenly appeared. Should have been good news, right? There were people around. Maybe one of them could help me out, but the details didn't support that conclusion. There were a staggering amount of them, what appeared to be dozens, all just standing there, perfectly still. They could have been mannequins. I stood in place, waiting for one of them to say something, waiting for any kind of reaction at all. I tried making out their faces, what they were wearing, though the rain made it difficult. The only thing I was reasonably sure about was that their frames were tall and slender, and that their skin was strangely pale, devoid of any color at all. Then I started wondering why I was able to notice this, why I was able to see a perfect outline of their bodies. They were naked, I realized. All of them, from head to toe. I turned, began scrambling back towards the house. That's when I saw more. They were scattered along every inch of the clearing, all pale, naked, just standing stationary between the trees. The house was completely surrounded by them. I slipped and fell about 4 times before I finally made it back inside. My entire body was soaked. My legs, arms, and back slick with mud. I was shaking my head, really not wanting to accept whatever the fuck was happening. This was a dream, I tried to convince myself. A really fucked up, vivid dream. Wake up then. Motherfucker, wake up. I waited for a long time before accepting that I wouldn't. I looked through a window. The pale figures were still there. It didn't look like they'd moved at all. I pulled out my phone. According to the weather app, it was now mostly sunny. 0% precipitation. This was all too much. I was panicking and decided it was worth dialing 112, the emergency line in the EU. The signal wasn't great, but I still managed to get through. I tried explaining to the operator what was happening in a way that made me seem the least insane. I'm in a house in the woods. Heavy rain outside. Strange, potentially malicious people surrounding me. After I'd finished speaking, there came a long silence on the other end. I sound like a lunatic, I thought to myself. She thinks I'm crazy. I looked through the window again. The figures were still there, but maybe it was a good thing if she thought I was crazy. You need to send somebody over, I said. I don't know the address. I don't know where I am. Send somebody over. Send somebody now. I paused. I really need to get the fuck out of here. Eventually, I heard her sigh. I'm sorry. I can't do that, she said. Her voice sounded shaky, as if she were on the verge of tears. Why? I asked her. Can't you trace the call or something? Anything? I'm sorry, she repeated. We won't be able to find you. I asked her what she meant. It's happened before. We searched the woods for weeks, for the house that you're in, but we were never able to find it. I stammered for a bit, suddenly unable to find any words. Listen to me, she continued. I believe you. Everything you've said. The first time I got a call about it, I didn't. But it's happened enough now that I know something's going on. But stay calm. Don't panic. Just listen carefully. My head was starting to spin. I didn't know how to react to that, but I obliged. I told her that I'd listen, because what the fuck else could I do? You're not doomed, she told me. Eventually the rain will stop. It might not seem possible right now, but you need to be patient. Don't lose your head. Do not panic. You need to be as lucid as possible, because when the rain does stop, you need to run like hell. You'll have to run for a long time, but don't stop. You might hear something chasing after you. Don't stop until you're out of the forest, completely free from the woods. They won't follow you any further. What about the people outside, or whatever the hell they are? She sighed. I don't know, she said. This is the first time hearing about them. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you there. I took a deep breath. Okay, that's fine, I said. But could you stay on the line with me? Absolutely, she said. I'll be here. Also, one more thing you need to know about the basement. Don't. She stopped mid-sentence and I looked at my phone. An empty battery sign lingered on the screen for just a moment before it went black. I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I just sat there. If you've never experienced sheer dread before, it's a weird kind of feeling. It nearly takes you out of your own body. But then I remembered what she'd told me, that eventually this would end, that I still had a chance. Once again, I looked through the window. The figures were all still there, though they appeared to have moved closer, or maybe not. I didn't want to think about it, and so I backed away. Be patient, I told myself. Just wait it out. I went back upstairs and got into one of the showers. If I had to wait, then I may as well be comfortable while I did so. The warm water felt nice, even more so as it was able to wash away the mud that had begun drying on my skin. I saw a bottle of shampoo and reached for it, but I hesitated before squeezing any out. It didn't feel right. It felt heavy, as if there was something solid inside of it. I unscrewed the lid, and immediately the shower filled up with a deep scent of formaldehyde and rot. I looked inside. The bottle was full of eyeballs, Looks like they had been scooped straight from their sockets. Some of them were blinking. I put it down and turned off the water and left the shower. I rinsed some of the mud off of my clothes in the sink and then squeezed as much water out of the fabric as I could before putting them back on. It certainly wasn't comfortable, but with everything else going on, it wasn't really a big deal. I didn't know what else to do, so I went back downstairs. It was starting to get dark out, something that just put me more on edge. But I tried to focus on something else, like the fact that I was starving. I went into the kitchen and opened up the fridge. There was nothing in there but a small container filled with some dark, sludgy-looking substance. I didn't open it up. Instead, I tried rifling through the cabinets, eventually finding one that was stocked with MREs. U.S. Army rations dated 1968, about a dozen of them. I didn't know what to make of it, so I just began opening them up, collecting the contents that I thought could have been edible. In the end, it just amounted a bunch of crackers and hard candies, along with one pack of instant coffee that hadn't yet solidified, which was a fine enough meal given the circumstances. I was checking the window every few minutes, and every time the figures seemed to be getting closer. It was hard not to stress about it, but they at least appeared to be moving at a snail's pace. It'd be a long while before they reached the house. I paid close attention to the rain as well. At times I'd sit on the couch for hours and just listen to it, but it never slowed down. It only poured harder. As the last daylight drained from the sky, the house was practically underwater. I could see nothing anymore. Water began leaking in from the door and from the ceiling in one of the bedrooms. I tried watching the television in the living room, but could only access one channel. It looked like handheld footage of an attic, the sole source of light being a candle on the floor. Somebody was sitting in front of it, their back turned to the camera. I could tell from the outline of their naked body that they were frail, skin clinging loosely to bone. After a while, they began pounding their fists on the floor, and I thought I could hear noise coming from somewhere upstairs. I turned off the television, and everything went silent. I didn't turn it back on. Soon I could hear a scratching noise, like fingernails on wood. I traced the source of it to the other side of the wooden door, the basement. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Water began leaking in from the bottom. It was murky, as if it were mixed with dirt or blood or both. It smelled horrendous. I just sat back down on the couch. After a while, I got the sense that I was being watched. Through the windows, I could see nothing but my own reflection. Then I turned the lights off, and after my eyes had adjusted to the dark, I could make out the outline of somebody looking in. It almost looked like their face was pressed up to the glass. I tried turning the lights back on, but they were no longer working. It was so dark that I could barely see my own hand in my front of my face, but maybe it was for the best, because then they wouldn't be able to see me. That awful smell from the water leaking in from the basement began to intensify, like sulfur mixed with metal, with a hint of a rot. I could also smell something burning. A strange heat filled the room. Soon I could hear the windows creaking, strain on the glass, as if something were putting gradual heavy pressure on it from outside. It no longer felt safe in the living room, and so I stood up, intending on going back upstairs. Then I realized I could no longer see anything at all. It was quite literally pitch black. I couldn't even tell where the windows were, which didn't make any sense, because shouldn't there have been at least a little moonlight? I began using my hands to feel around, to guide my way towards the stairs. Eventually, I found the railing. As I was making my way up the steps, I nearly tripped over something. It was a person, sitting on the steps. Their skin was cold and clammy. Then they began to cry. The crying soon turned into sobbing, which turned into wailing. I ran up the rest of the stairs, and I heard it chasing after me. It sounded like they crawling on all fours. I felt along the wall until I found one of the bedrooms and then rushed in and shut the door behind me. Whatever was on the other side began slamming it, each impact rattling the frame. The wailing then turned into a horrific, inhuman shriek. I was still clutching the knife, though it didn't provide much comfort. My heart was beating faster than it ever had, faster than I thought possible. Each slam was more furious than the last, and soon I could hear the wood beginning to splinter. The shriek filled the room, and it was loud enough to make my head hurt. I scrambled through the darkness until I found the bathroom, shutting myself inside it right as I could hear the bedroom door being ripped off its hinges. I listened as it stalked its way around the room. Sounded like a dead body being dragged in circles across the carpet. I tried to stay as silent as possible, thinking that maybe it didn't know I was in here. But then it stopped moving, and then it knocked on the door. "Police. Open up," it said. The voice sounded human enough. I was nearly tempted to listen. "Open up, police." But I stayed still. "If you don't open the door, I'm gonna come in there and rip your stomach out." A few more of these threats, and then it changed tactics. "Look what you've done," it said, now in my dad's voice. "Fucked everything up. You could have had a good life. What have you done?" I shook my head. "Fuck you," I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" It responded. It actually sounded exactly like him. "Get your ass out here right now. Right fucking now." I'd done a good job of staying composed up until this point, but it was all starting to become too much. You can only experience so much terror before it starts to overload your senses. I guess for some, it ends up paralyzing them. But something else happened to me. The fear turned into disbelief, which then turned into rage. Because what was the point of all this? Was it just to scare me? For what? Why me? What the hell had I done wrong? I started asking these things aloud. Then I walked up to the door, pressed my head against the wood. "What the fuck is this?" I screamed, letting out all my frustrations out at once. "What do you fucking want?" They went silent. The knocking stopped as well. But they didn't leave. I could still hear their raggedy breaths on the other side. I continued to scream. "If you want to open up the door, go ahead and fucking do it. Do it and go fuck yourself. Do it and then go to hell. I don't care. I don't care anymore. Get this fucking bullshit over with." Soon my throat was raw, spit flying all over my lips and chin. I was clenching my jaw hard enough for it to hurt. "So you're just gonna fucking stand there? Do something! What's the fucking point of this? What's the fucking point? Do something or fuck off and let me leave." After this, my memories became scattered. I remember continuing to scream, even as my voice turned hoarse. I remember the rage I felt, even though I couldn't recall exactly what was said. I remember threatening voices coming from the drain in the sink, water splashing inside the toilet, the shower turning off and on, a burning smell filling up the room. They were really trying, doing everything they could, but I think it just pissed me off even more. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the room was bright. I sat up, seeing sunlight streaming in from the window, and then the pain hit me. My knuckles were bruised, pieces of glass sticking out of them. There was glass, blood, and water all over the floor. The mirror had been shattered, as had the shower door. Holes in the walls. I stood up and looked through the window. No more rain, just a cloudless blue sky. I walked over to the door and opened it cautiously, half expecting to find some monstrosity waiting for me on the other side. But there was nothing. I left the bedroom and went down the stairs and into the living room. The door to the basement was open, and it was flooded completely by that dark, foul water. I made sure to avoid stepping on any of it as I made my way to the front door. I opened it up, stepped out into the warm light. Then I started running. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, but I never stopped. Not until I had reached a road. My legs were long past their limits at this point, and I just about collapsed the moment my shoes touched the asphalt. I never did hear anything following me, but when I looked back into the forest, I could see somebody standing at the tree line. A young woman in a blue dress. She would have been the most beautiful person I'd ever seen, had her perfect features not been contorted into visceral, burning hatred. She continued to scowl at me, and I stared back at her. Eventually a car came by, and I waved them down. Two large men. They were wary at first, and asked to pat me down before they'd let me in. When they found nothing, they offered to drive me back into town. As we drove away, I looked back at the woods one last time, and the woman was no longer there. Story number 2. I live in a small town in the Oklahoma Panhandle. I'm not really a social guy, and I left my family to move here because it's quiet. Nothing ever really happens, until it did. At the time, I was 17. I never believed in anything paranormal. I liked cryptid stories, but that was just for fun. I didn't think they were real. I'm not on drugs. I wasn't hallucinating. I've tried to forget what I saw, but it still finds me in my dreams. Behind my trailer is a 6 to 7 foot metal fence. It rattles in the wind, but it's strong. 10 feet beyond that are other trailers, but the weird part is behind the fence. A dirt mound, a small ditch, and a patch of dying trees and dead grass. Nothing really there, except a cemetery, maybe 20 yards out, fenced in, old. I sleep in the back room of my trailer. My room faces the fence and has a full wall of windows. From my bed, I can just barely see the tombstones over the fence. My vision's not great, but I can tell they're there. One night I was up late working on a school assignment, high on caffeine. I had a YouTube playlist of skinwalker and cryptid stories playing in the background. Nothing unusual. Then I heard my dogs growling outside. Not strange. They sometimes bark at my cats who jump on the roof, but this time they started whimpering. Then came silence. Total, still silence. I looked out and saw something bolt past the dirt mound. It was tall, taller than the fence. I swear it had sunken red eyes. It moved fast and disappeared. I tried to brush it off. Caffeine, sleep deprivation. But when I finally lay down to sleep, I heard a voice. My voice, clear as day. It said, "Brody." That's my neighbor's dog. Then I heard a yelp, a horrible, sharp cry. Then, nothing. The same dead silence. I wanted to cry. I hadn't said a single word all day. Something out there had heard me before, and it could sound like me. The next morning, I heard my neighbor screaming. She was crying, hysterical. I ran out the back door and saw it. Brody was dead. His head was bitten off, and his body was jammed in the gate between our yards. My neighbor passed out from the shock. I jumped the fence and called 911. The cops told us it was probably a coyote. I didn't believe it, not even for a second. My neighbor moved out a few days later. Her dad had cancer, and she wanted to be closer to him. I helped her pack. I dropped her off at the airport. She took everything. Her trailer was left empty. That night, I heard her voice. Peter, come out. I made some dinner. That's what she said from behind the fence. Same soft voice, same tone. But she never called me Peter. Always handsome or something like that. And I knew she was gone. Then I heard something hop the fence. The silence returned. Heavy, unnatural. I held my breath, afraid that even a sound would give me away. Then came the tapping. Something tapped on my window with what sounded like a bony finger. I cracked one eye open. I saw it. The same tall figure, except this time it was wearing her skin. Like it had tried to become her, but didn't get it quite right. It didn't see me. My room was a mess. Clothes everywhere. I think it couldn't tell where I was in the chaos. Eventually, around 4:02 a.m., it jumped back over the fence and disappeared. The next morning, while I was packing to leave, I heard the news. My neighbor had been found dead in a ditch near the airport. She never made it to her flight. Whatever that thing was, it knew she died, and it used her voice, her face, to try to lure me out. I'm 20 now. I live in New York with my family. I've never spoken about this out loud. I'm scared that if I say its name, if I even think about it too much, it'll come back. But I can't forget it, because it wore her skin, and it used my voice. Story number 3. The sterile scent of the Mars 1 shuttle's interior was a constant companion, but it never quite masked the memory of Earth. Leaving home wasn't easy, even for a quiet guy like me. My single mother, a woman who had taught me everything from astrophysics to how to make a decent grilled cheese, hugged me tight. "Be careful, Jacob," she'd whispered, her voice a fragile thing. I nodded, walking off, and posed for the cameras with the rest of the crew, a forced smile plastered on my face. This was it, the first manned mission to Mars. NASA had already laid the groundwork with AI drones, building a base just waiting for us. The Mars rover, a relic of past ambition, would be there to broadcast our landing, a symbol of humanity's reach. Commander Evans, a burly man with a booming laugh and an ego to match, clapped me on the back. "Don't forget the line, Jacob," he'd joked. "One small step." I just rolled my eyes. The launch was a controlled chaos of rumbling and shaking, a symphony of raw power that vibrated through my bones. I'd run the simulations 1,000 times over. I knew this beast and made no mistakes, no troubles. Once we cleared Earth's embrace, the autopilot took over, a digital nanny for the next 5 months. The weeks ahead blurred into a monotonous rhythm. I spent my time in the cockpit, running diagnostics, checking systems, anything to keep my mind engaged, occupied from the desolate emptiness we were hurling through. My other crewmates, a lively bunch, often tried to pull me into their card games, but I preferred the quiet hum of the ship. The desolation was calming. Evans, though, was a different story. He'd stomp into the cockpit, barking orders, reminding me he was in charge. "Jacob, status report. Are we still on schedule? Any inconsistencies?" He'd demand, even though the autopilot handled everything. He was a good commander when it mattered, I guess, but a bit of a dick when there wasn't a crisis. The crew was a mixed bag of personalities. Dr. Remier's, our medical officer, was usually a calm presence, her dark eyes always full of a quiet understanding. Then there was Samuel Sam, our chief engineer, a gruff but brilliant man with grease perpetually under his fingernails. His second in command, David, was younger, quieter, and always seemed to be in Sam's shadow. Our biologist, Lena, was perpetually excited about everything. her infectious enthusiasm a stark contrast to my own reserved nature. Finally, there was Ben, the geologist, a lanky man who could talk for hours about rock formations. We were a family, albeit a slightly dysfunctional one, hurtling through the vast emptiness of space. It was during the last month, the final stretch, when the first tremor of unease started to ripple through me. I was reviewing the navigation logs when I noticed it. The autopilot was off course, subtly at first, then more dramatically, too far off. Then, a cluster of mass appeared on the radar. Space junk, I thought, trying to dismiss the knot tightening in my gut. I tried to veer the ship back on its intended trajectory, but it was like an unseen force was pulling us. I swore it was aiming for us. I watched as the dot on the radar veered with the ship. Then, thud. The entire ship shuddered, a bone-rattling jolt that sent equipment clattering. Alarms blared, a cacophony of red lights flashing across the control panels I quickly turned off. I ran a quick diagnostics. Communication blocked. The crew, jolted awake, piled into the cockpit, their faces a mask of confusion and fear. Minor freak out, as Evans would say. "What was that, Jacob?" Sam asked, his voice laced with concern. I tried to sound calm, confident. "Just a bit of space junk. We're back on course. Looks like the communication satellite took a hit." Sam, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "Damaged satellite. I can fix that, but we'll need to slow down. I'll need a spotter, someone to tether me." He looked at me, a silent question in his eyes. "You come with. You're already up." David threw his hands up before rubbing his eyes. I wasn't getting out of it. I nodded, the logical choice. "I'll go." The void outside was an oppressive blanket of black, punctuated by the distant pinpricks of stars. Tethered to me, Sam floated, a tiny silhouette against the immensity. I watched him, my breath fogging inside my helmet. The onward sun cast long, distorted shadows around the broken satellite, making it hard to discern detail. I kept missing the handles as I fumbled along, following Sam at a safe distance, reaching the satellite. For a second, I thought I saw a hole in the hull, a jagged tear in the ship's skin, but I dismissed it as an optical illusion, a trick of the absence of light. Sam worked with practiced ease, his movements precise and economical. I kept my gaze fixed on him, but my mind was playing tricks. The vastness of space began to press in, a dizzying sense of disorientation. I felt like I was spinning, unable to tell up from down, staring into an abyss that seemed to stare back. The emptiness was no longer just a backdrop. It felt like a living entity, cold and indifferent. I tried to look at my hands, but I couldn't even see them. They looked like the void, devoid of all light. It made me wonder if I was even holding on. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sam gave me the thumbs up. We worked together and brought the damaged satellite back, a cumbersome, metallic carcass. Back inside, Sam took it to his station, his brow furrowed in concentration. The day droned on, a false sense of normalcy settling over the ship. That night I was jolted awake by a faint, persistent scraping sound. It was subtle at first, like something dragging across metal, then growing louder, more rhythmic. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lay there for a moment, listening, my imagination conjuring horrors in the silence, before a loud crash. Curiosity, or maybe a desperate need to dispel the growing fear, propelled me out of my bunk. The halls were eerily empty. the emergency lights casting long, unsettling shadows. Every creak of the ship seemed amplified, every distant hum of machinery a potential threat. I was halfway down the corridor, nerves frayed, when I bumped into Evans. We both jumped, startled. A comical moment, if not for the gnawing dread. "Jacob, what are you doing awake?" Evans' voice was a low growl. "I heard something," I whispered. "A scraping and a bang. You didn't hear it?" His eyes narrowed. "Yeah, the bang. I heard it. Figured it was just the ship settling, but good enough time to do rounds." A sudden sickening crunch echoed from Sam's station. Evans and I exchanged a terrified glance. Without a word, we moved towards the sound, our footsteps unnervingly loud in the quiet hall. Evans pushed open the door to Sam's engineering bay. The smell hit me first. A coppery, metallic tang, thick and nauseating. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and that's when the corner of my eye caught something. I could have sworn it saw something. A shadow, long and slender, slunk into the vent system with an unnatural speed. It was too quick, too fluid to be human. Then Evans's flashlight beam cut through the gloom. What it revealed will forever be burned into my memory. Sam, what was left of him. His body was a grotesque parody of a human form, mangled, half-eaten from the waist down. His face contorted between a scream and a cry, his mouth open to inhuman size. His arms frozen, rigor mortis, posed as if he was pushing away something that wasn't there anymore. Blood splattered up the wall in two sickening trails, oozing from where his gut would have been, leading to the ceiling, as if something had played in his entrails, a trail of blood slinking towards the vents. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. My knees felt weak at the sight. Evans, his face ashen, fumbled for his comm unit as he pulled the emergency shutter closed on Sam's room. "Code red, all crew to the cockpit. Repeat, all crew to the cockpit," he bellowed, his voice raw with terror. We sprinted towards the cockpit, the most secure room on the ship. The other crew members, still half asleep, began to trickle in, assuming it was just another monthly drill. Dr. Remier's, Lena, Ben, and David, their faces creased with sleepy annoyance, shuffled through the blast doors. Evans waited until everyone was inside, then slammed the door shut, the hydraulic hiss of the lock a chilling finality. This woke up most of the crew's grogginess. He moved to a terminal, bringing up the security cameras, looking over them, not to see Sam's halfway. He was a dead zone. But to see everyone's domicile doors, he began rewinding their feeds. We weren't armed. Why would we be? The closest thing to a weapon on this research vessel was a kitchen knife, maybe some gardening tools from the hydroponics bay, or a power tool from engineering, but nothing that could do that damage to a human. I tried to tell everyone what was happening, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush, but Evans cut me off before I could start, his voice hoarse with forced authority. "Sam is dead. Murdered. We're in lockdown until I find out who did it. Send a message to base, Jacob." "There's still no communication, Commander." "Sam didn't get to finish the repairs," I stammered, the words catching in my throat as I thought of my comrade. Evans glared at me, his eyes darting to the other crew members. "If one of you did this, have mercy. You've damned us all." I couldn't fathom it. A human being couldn't have done this. Half of Sam was simply gone. The crew began to argue, a rising tide of disbelief and anger. Evans was persistent, convinced one of them was guilty. clinging to the flimsy evidence that he'd found him with me. Luckily, that kept me off his list. But the fear of the unknown was quickly turning into resentment. Finally, unable to contain the rising tide of mutiny, Evans reluctantly opened the blast doors. The crew, shaken but convinced it was some sort of mental break from Evans. They didn't even see what we saw. They shuffled back to their quarters. Evans whispered to me, "We locked down Sam's room. No one sees the crime scene. If one of them did it, they'll let something slip, say something only they would know." I was barely listening to him. The thought of one of our crew, our family, doing this to someone was unthinkable. Plus, I couldn't shake the thought of the shadow out of my head, sliding into the vent. The next morning, the ship felt different, the air thick with unspoken dread. We gathered in the dining area. David gave a few words for Sam. He was more a father to me than my own, that man. David stammered and choked on his words before regaining himself. That man had dreams to build a new world, engineer a new planet. God rest his soul. A grim silence hanging over us as we ate our meager breakfast. David left after his speech, distracting his grief, I thought to myself. Lena and Ben, predictably breaking the silence, began to bicker about food rations. It had become a common occurrence, the close quarters wearing on everyone's nerves. Lena was accusing Ben of taking too many portions, insisting we conserve food. "Ben, you can't take that much," Lena insisted, her voice tight with urgency. "We have to make these rations last, both here and on Mars." Ben rolled his eyes. "An extra Jell-O isn't going to topple society, Lana Banana." "But it could starve us when we're trying to get the plants to grow," Lena retorted, a sharp edge to her tone. "And don't call me that. We're not together anymore." That's when it dropped. From the ceiling, a black, slender creature with long, spindly limbs seemed to unfold, growing as it descended. It was a nightmare given form. Its arms, tipped with spike-like talons, lifted like cobras, then plunged into Lena and Ben's heads, bringing their bickering to an end as their foreheads met. Their eyes twitched, a horrifying dance of agony. Lena's voice crackled her last sentence as Ben swung his arms around him, a horrifying attempt to swat at the creature, a futile effort in his last moments. The creature's mouth opened back with a crackling reminiscent of a campfire as it revealed an array of razor-sharp teeth. It bit down on their heads with a brutal force. A sickening crunch echoed in the now silent mess hall, pulling back, tearing flesh and brain matter in a grotesque feast of my crewmates' scalps. Dr. Ramirez screamed, a high-pitched, guttural sound of pure horror, and turned to run out the doors. I was frozen, my mind unable to process the monstrosity before me, watching as the beast coiled its neck back to swallow the bite. Then Evans grabbed me, his grip like iron, and hauled me out of the mess hall back towards the cockpit. David, our second engineer, was already there, hunched over a terminal, running diagnostics with his back to the door when Dr. Ramirez burst in, already clicking the blast door button as Evans and I walked through the door. It shut with a loud hiss of gas. "What's going on?" David asked, before looking up at the security camera feed. His eyes widened, his face paling as he saw the aftermath in the mess hall. The creature was gone, vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the horror of Ben and Lena's body was in the center of the camera, their faces unrecognizable bodies mashed together in a pile of visceral gore. The lights flicked off briefly before the ship's backup kicked on, casting a red glow across the ship. "What was the... David? Status report?" Evans barked. It was different to hear him ask someone else. "Our main power supply is reading as destroyed. We're running backups. Should be okay as long as we stay in the sun." Dr. Ramirez became hysterical, sobbing uncontrollably. David was trying to calm her when Evans grabbed me aside. I was shocked. His voice was shaking. "We need to take that thing out, or we're dead. There's no way out of here." But then a thought, cold and clear, cut through my panic. There was a way out. The landing shuttle. It was designed to land on Mars while the main station orbited. To limit casualties, crew land in the shuttle, and the ship's autopilot lands the payload. It had its own fuel, enough to get us on course, and then enough to brace for landing. It would be cutting it close, but it was our only chance. We'd need supplies for the next 2 weeks for the 4 of us, and we'd have to make it across the ship, past that thing. Dr. Ramirez and David stayed behind in the relative safety of the cockpit. Evans, ever the leader, volunteered me, of course. "You're the pilot, Jacob. You know the ship's layout best." We made our way to the medbay first, carefully avoiding the mess hall. Making our way through the red-lit corridors, we gathered what we could. First aid kits, oxygen tanks, anything essential. We loaded them onto a rolling cart, its wheels scraping against the metal floor. The sound, that incessant scraping, was unnervingly similar to the noise that had woken me up last night. It's like it was everywhere now, a phantom echo of my trauma, echoing. We reached the mess hall. Evans gestured towards the bathroom that connected the hallway to the kitchen and mess hall. "Through here, we can avoid the scene." We pushed the cart through the narrow doorway, the scraping of the wheels continuing, but it started to sound different. Then we abruptly stopped. I couldn't tell you why we did, but in unison Evans and I both froze. We listened, every nerve on edge, as the scraping continued, sounding like it came from every direction. We sat frozen for what felt like forever, until it stopped. "Come on," Evans whispered, his voice low. "The less time, the better." He pulled the cart forward, and I jumped, startled, my heart pounding. We entered the kitchen. The familiar smell of stale food a stark contrast to the horrific aroma that still lingered in the air from the mess hall, a room away. We loaded the cart with food rations, our movements swift and efficient. Now, we just had to make it back. "Come on, this way. We need to move quicker." Evans led the way back through the mess hall. I tried not to look, but my eyes were drawn to it, the aftermath. Lena and Ben lay intertwined, their bodies mutilated, the floor slick with blood, and something else, something I didn't want to identify, the sheer brutality of it, the way their bodies were torn apart, made my stomach churn. These were my friends, the people I had laughed with, argued with, shared a journey with. Now they were just pieces, sprawled together in some sick art piece, their heads stumps and torsos slashed. Ben's arm was missing, Lena's stump of a head containing a piece of her jaw, her tongue exposed. As we pushed through the doors, leaving the unspeakable behind, a shadow in the red caught the corner of my eye. The creature, coming as a blur of black, seemed to materialize out of thin air, launching itself at me. Its nails, impossibly sharp, dug deep into my uniform, piercing the fabric. A horrible, acrid smell, like stale blood and something else, something truly toxic, filled my lungs as it drooled onto my face. It made a series of rapid, clicking sounds as it unhooked its jaw, displaying the rows of teeth, a chilling rhythm that spoke of hunger and predatory intent. Evans reacted instantly. "Hey, over here," he yelled, moving back, flailing his flashlight, trying to draw its attention. The creature looked up, its eyes, if you could call them eyes, fixed on Evans. It let go of me, its claws tearing a jagged rip in my shoulder, putting the weight on the other before creeping away toward Evans. It crept toward him like a cheetah ready to pounce. "What are you doing?" I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "Saving. You now go," Evans shouted. "Over her, come on." As he bolted around the corner, the alien followed him, its claws scraping as its limbs slid on the spaceship floors, its clicking growing louder as it unhinged its jaw more. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the cart and ran, the scraping of its wheels a frantic heartbeat in the silence of the ship. I heard the sickening clicking turn to screaming and then crunching, the alien feasting. I saw the shadow of the scene, cast by Evan's flashlight as it rolled away, his body being ripped from its midsection, the last vestige of his life. My friend, my commander, sacrificed himself for me. I burst into the cockpit door, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I pounded on its glass. David looked up, pressing the button to open the door, his face etched with concern. "Where's the commander?" "He didn't make it," I choked out, the words tasting like ash. Dr. Ramirez let out a fresh sob, her face buried in her hands. "Oh my God, we're all gonna die," Dr. Ramirez wailed. "Get your head on straight. We have to go, and we have to go now," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We moved through the corridor. The only sound was the insistent scraping of the cart. Each step was a silent prayer, each breath a tightrope walk. We reached the shuttle doors, a beacon of hope in the suffocating dread. We quickly loaded the food, then scrambled for our suits. David checked the terminal. His face fell ill of color. "Jacob, there's only enough fuel to land, not to get us there. Or the other way around. Get us there, but we won't be able to land." My heart sank. The shuttle was meant to be filled with fuel by the computer once the ship was in orbit and no longer needed the reserve. We couldn't do it manually. No overrides. We were stranded. Then, a flicker of an idea, a desperate, dangerous gamble, crossed David's face. "I can throttle the ship, use the inertia to throw you two on track. You'd have to detach before the main ship oxygenates and depressurizes the shuttle." My throat tightened. It was a suicide mission for him, and possibly for us. "No, David, there's no other way, Jacob," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "If you two make it, tell my family. Tell them I did my duty for the New World and died loving them." Dr. Ramirez began to cry, a heart-wrenching sound. We said our goodbyes, a hurried, tearful farewell. David left for the cockpit. His shoulders squared as he turned the corner. Dr. Ramirez was having a full-blown panic attack as we suited up. She zipped mine as I hinted for her to turn. I can't breathe," she gasped, her hands trembling as she tried to pull her suit over her arms. Bad time to be claustrophobic, I thought grimly. "Doctor, I need you. I can't do this without you," I tried to assure her. She didn't lighten up. Getting impatient, I put on my helmet. I was already fully suited, but she still needed help. "Come on, Ramirez, breath with me, in and out. Come on with me." She joined in and out, in and out. David's voice crackled over the comms, a distant, metallic echo. "Ready, Jacob. Just need the signal." "Copy, stand by." I spoke firmly into the comms unit on my suit. That's when we heard a thumping from above, a heavy, deliberate sound that traveled to the vent on the wall. My blood ran cold. The air, even in my suit, went stale. The creature sprung out the vent, a black, spindly horror as it landed on its feet, standing to its hind legs. It let out a piercing scream that vibrated through my bones, and I felt a sickening crack as the glass on my helmet fractured. Dr. Remiers felt the scream direct as she fell, clutching her head, blood streaming from her ears and eyes. I lunged to brace her, my space-suited hands clumsy, unable to get a firm grip. But the alien was faster. It had her leg. Its talons dug deep into her flesh, crunching the bone, as it ensured her leg would be shredded if she tried to escape. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong, a last desperate connection. The creature crawled forward over her as it began tearing into her stomach with its free claw, a horrifying symphony of tearing flesh and crunching bone as it bit down on her sternum. I tried to pull free, to help her, but she wouldn't let go. Her grip tightened, even as her lifeblood spilled onto the floor. I looked at her eyes, wide with pain and terror, as her body twitched with each bite from the beast. And in that moment, I knew she was holding me, keeping me there, and she couldn't let go. I unhooked my glove, tearing my hand free from her grasp. I watched as she pulled the glove in, her last cling to life. The beast locked eyes on me and lunged, and I reacted as quick as I could. "Now!" I screamed into my radio. Diving into the shuttle and slamming the door shut behind me. The beast's claw broke off as it tried to reach into the shuttle. The ship lurched forward, fast, before a massive veer left. I felt the inertia throw me back, then the sudden freeing sensation of the detachment. The shuttle shot from the rear port of the ship, detaching just as I heard the shuttle ship begin to pressurize, leaving a trail of gas and oxygen, a gaseous tether to David. The smoke was broken a moment later, as I saw the beast flung out the ship from the docking bay into the void of space. My head throbbed as I watched. I quickly realized my suit's oxygen was leaking, a steady hiss from my wrist and ungloved hand. My hand, exposed to the vacuum of space, was already turning an alarming shade of blue. I fumbled for the roll of patch tape, my fingers clumsy with the cold, and sealed the rip around my wrist and then covered my hand in a makeshift bandage. I breathed slowly, deeply, calming my ragged nerves. Then with a click, I flipped the switch to pressurize the shuttle. I waited a minute before removing my helmet. The hissing of the shuttle as it filled with mess was deafening, even through the helmet. The 2 weeks to Mars were a blur of fragmented sleep and waking nightmares. The putrid stench of blood and bile, the clicking of those talons and its jaw, the screams of my friends. It was all replayed on an endless loop in my mind. I barely ate, barely slept. I lost 25 pounds in that desolate journey. The beast claw lay in the corner on the shuttle, tucked away from my view. I couldn't bring myself to. Every time I did, I saw it piercing another friend, taking another member of my family. Then the entry to Mars was a cruel joke. Entering the atmosphere was fine, a familiar shudder and roar, but in the thin air, The fuel gauge dropped to empty quickly. The shuttle heated as it plummeted, breaking off a fin. It quickly began to spin, a dizzying, uncontrolled descent. The parachute deployed, but it fluttered uselessly, unable to stabilize us. I needed to drop the fins and pull the winglets straight. Pieces of metal flew off the shuttle as it plummeted to the desolate planet. The shuttle's window cracked as the air began to leave the shuttle again. Back home, they were watching. A world holding its breath as the Mars One shuttle spun wildly, a tiny fragile speck against the red backdrop. In the spinning, the G-forces pressed down on me, crushing me. My exposed hand, the one that had been in the vacuum, was turning a terrifying shade of navy as my arms were forced forward. I felt consciousness slipping, the world fading to black. I felt a surge of raw, desperate will. My mother's face flashed in my mind. Dr. Ramire's last grip, Evan's sacrifice. I reached with my good hand and dropped the fins. It gave little relief. My blue, lifeless hand, still stretching, grasping. My head felt like it was going to pop as my bandage caught around the lever. I winced as I pulled, the tape from the patch roll tearing my already dead skin. The wings of the shuttle dropped down, a jarring shift that slowed the spin. The parachute billowed open, a magnificent white blossom against the crimson sky. From the Mars rover, a whole week later than scheduled, the people watched as the shuttle descended. It came to the landing pad with a jarring thud. I looked closely at the crack in my helmet, my gaze soon fixed on my now black hand, devoid of life, a price of survival. I walked to the shuttle doors, my legs feeling like lead. Using my forearm to spin the hatch, I stepped back as it fell open, taking a deep breath as I looked out. The light was blindingly different from the shuttle, from Earth even. The rays of heat cast like a brilliant sun on an alien world. The world was utterly, breathtakingly beautiful, a vast, desolate landscape of ochre and rust, stretching to a horizon under a sky of muted salmon. Pillars of segmented rock rose like towers, and there, in the distance, bathed in the Martian light, was the home base NASA's AI had built, a cluster of gleaming modules. The rover, a silent sentinel, waited patiently at the landing zone. Its robotic camera arm zoomed in on me as I stepped onto the Martian sand. The sheer overwhelming wave of it, the pain, the beauty, broke through me. I fell to my knees, the dust of Mars coating my suit in a cloud, and I wept, not just for relief, but for the faces I would never see again, for the horrors I had witnessed, and for the silence that now stretched before me, a silence I would carry for the rest of my life. Through my choked sobs and cracked helmet, I uttered 3 words, my commander fresh on my mind. 1. Giant leap. Story number 4. There were never any construction crews before it appeared. Nothing to indicate that people had worked on it or that it was planned. Where there once been a lot, there was now a house. But this house was not like the ones that surrounded it. Our street was not a place where the populace thrived and extravagance ran through. We were modest in our living quarters. Our one-story homes more than sufficed. But this house towered over us, casting a shadow over our sleepy town. Its design imitated a mansion more than presented as one. Staring at the windows only revealed them to be glass panes attached to the brick wall, with no way to look inside. The side door was attached to what was supposed to be a chimney, causing fire to jump out whenever it opened. Catching the garage door opening revealed it to open sideways, much like the front. The more you stared, the more nonsensical the building became. Our cul-de-sac was tight-knit, but welcoming. Our neighbors were the first to attempt to welcome these new guests. They had stopped by our house before walking over. My memories of 30 years ago failed to recall specifics, but they invited my parents to their surprise housewarming. My parents denied. Our neighbors then left to go to the house at the end. They never came back. The next day, where my neighbor's house once been, a sign reading "For Occupation" stood on its ground. It lay empty for weeks before another house came in its place, bringing with it new occupants. What can I say of those occupants? My parents never wanted me to come close to them, for like the houses they inhabited, they seemed like imitation rather than flesh. Their white teeth always shone in a smile that was just wide enough to cross over from friendly to creepy. Their skin, it crossed the barrier of what could be considered pale into almost ghost white. And their mannerisms, even their bizarre appearances, would have been excused if not for the way they acted. Their speech sounded strung together, like the words they spoke belonged to different sentences spoken in different ways. When outside, sometimes they would just walk around in a circle, or they'd start mismatching chores like painting the grass or using a lawnmower to vacuum their car. Other times, they would just stand and stare. Sometimes I felt that they were staring at me. My parents forbid me from going anywhere near that house, which, after a while, soon became houses. I heeded their demands not out of obedience to them, but out of fear for my own safety. And although many neighbors and friends went, say, towards that house, getting replaced not soon after, we stood our ground. I remember that, when my mother was still on the town council, major chances had come about due to the house. Our schools, infrastructure, and other utilities suffered major cuts by the mayor, all so they could reallocate funds somewhere else. They would shy away when you asked where the money was going. My mother was the only opposition on SACE, the council, to this change, but was quickly outvoted by the other members of the council. I sat in one of those meetings once, when my father was busy and couldn't look after me. I saw he scream on deaf ears and cry out every word of her plea, but everything she did was dismissed in a monotone voice. I caught for a glimpse what the mayor and council were paying for. As Mom stormed out of the hall, the members gathered in a meeting room next to the main entrance. My eyes caught what I assume now to be the budget chart of the city, and taking up what I believed to have been almost 70% of it was just something called House. The council disbanded soon after. Although the vote was not unanimous, the other members just never showed back up to meetings, leaving my mother to have to deal with everything alone. Soon, however, the mayor personally showed up to fire her. At that point, I hardly recognized the man anymore. Ever since he reallocated the funds, he started getting paler, his smile more toothy, his grin growing wider. I could sense he was becoming more like the imitators at that house. My mother cried that day, that night, and the next morning. I tried to console her, but she pushed me away. Before I left, I heard her mumbling something. That wasn't my friend anymore. Now that my mother was without a job now, my father was the sole breadwinner for our family. But it wasn't as if his place was free of that house's influence. He told us night after night about how those things have picked up jobs at his place of work. They didn't seem to even do anything productive, other than to type random letters on a notepad, or even resting their head on their computer. Yet, despite everything, they were praised by upper management all the time, even promoted faster than my father ever was. Soon enough, even his new boss was one of those imitators, as he called them. This continued for years. My mother searched for a new job, but each one was either run by an imitator or rejected her for her criminal record. My mother, who never so much as stole a candy bar and would never hurt a fly, now had a criminal record. I inferred it had something to do with the council, but I couldn't know for certain. This had also made me an outcast, as my former friends turned on me for not bowing down to these new invaders. They called me names and pushed me around while they got showered in riches and the latest toys, accessories, and other forms of opulence. All the while, they were oblivious to their own transformation. It wasn't until college where I managed to escape from town. I went somewhere far away where they couldn't follow me. Driving out seemed almost like a nightmare. Each resident of those houses and those who had given in were all outside on their lawns. I could feel their eyes on me, so I tried not to stare back. Once I had left, I felt something I hadn't since before those things came. Relief. I've had a normal life from that point onwards. I've started a family, made friends, and found a career in history, a passion of mine. For now, I've been able to have a pretty normal life. I have only been back to my childhood town once, though, and with my hindsight, I realized that was a grave mistake. I had gotten a call from my mother. Apparently, things have gotten even worse for them since I left. The house have started to grow. Some even started to connect. My mother even says she can feel a heartbeat when walking near one. I knew I couldn't leave them there, so I rushed to get them as fast as I could. Going back, I found the most unusual surprise. The signs that had once displayed the name of the town only said one thing: welcome home. I knew I really shouldn't have tried to go further, but I didn't want my parents to be left alone in that hell. Going in, I saw what my mother was talking about. The houses looked like what you'd think a child would design after asking about his dream home. Everyone was taller, with rooms sticking out of each other, and even being diagonal at some points. Everyone was outside, staring at me that same way, just like when I left. I ignored them. My parents were my top priority, after all. Coming to my cul-de-sac, I saw something I had only ever read about in science fiction before. It was the house from all those years ago, but now it looked almost like an organ. It had what I could only describe as tendrils sticking out of it, connecting the other houses that looked even more grotesque. It could see every branch of it moving, beating almost like a heart. But that didn't hit me as hard as when I saw my former home. It was completely covered in those tendrils. Not an inch of the house even showed. I tried calling my parents. Maybe they had gotten out before whatever had happened. My hope, fading with each ring, eventually died out when I saw the tendrils start to contract. This thing had trapped my parents inside, and now it was slowly suffocating them. There was no doubts about it now. I know others that would have been braver and tried to ram into these tendrils to save their loved ones. Unfortunately, I am not one of them. I drove away like a coward, right then and there. I let my parents die, without a fight. No one tried to stop me from leaving, and got to my house after a long and arduous drive. I still blame myself for what happened. If only I had thought to get them out of there before the house took revenge. If only I tried to fight back against this monster, maybe they would still be here. I cried, just like my mother did all those years ago. After the service, I started up a habit of driving around the whole town now. My wife thinks I'm getting paranoid, but I know what I saw, and I know what happens if you don't get away fast enough. I don't know if whatever that house is has started to spread, but the first time I see one of those monstrosities enter my town, I am protecting my family and moving as far away as we can. Hell, I've even started getting concerned now, as one of my friends showed me some vacation photos with one of those things in the background. Just knowing they're spreading is putting me on edge. But what concerns me even more were the faces of those outside the house. They had the same exact faces as my mother and father, and they were looking right at the camera. Story number 5. It's quite true, what they say. You only miss something once it is taken from you. On October 3rd, 2003, I stopped hearing laughter. It happened at Frank's barbecue party. Frank was my closest friend, and he loved nothing more than to drink, sing, and laugh. He was the heart of every gathering. It was a beautiful day. The backyard smelled of freshly cut grass and smoky sausages. I could hear birds chirping above, meat sizzling on the grill. A soft breeze gently shook the trees and whistled past me. We were all huddled in a circle, beers in hand, exchanging the small, forgettable details of our lives. Fred was swamped with hospital work. Rob's 3 noisy kids occupied most of his time. John told us about his recent divorce and his newfound hatred towards his ex-wife. I think that soured the mood a little. Frank, being himself, decided to break up the awkward silence with a joke. I don't recall exactly what he said. At that moment, I was busy pondering empty words of comfort for John. Whatever it was, Frank's joke must have been extremely funny, because everyone laughed. At least, that's what I thought they were doing. In perfect harmony, my friends opened their mouths, their faces contorted with glee, bodies trembling in excitement, shoulders bouncing up and down. Their smiles twisted, and they shook like puppets on invisible strings. But no sound came out. I could feel my entire body tighten. A violent chill ran down my back. It felt like an eternity. All I could do was watch in dread as my friends convulsed silently in front of me. Meanwhile, the birds kept chirping. The sausages kept sizzling. Frank was the first to break the silence. "Tom." Frank's smile faded. "Are you all right?" he asked. I mumbled some excuse and said I should be going home. They were sad to see me leave, albeit somewhat confused. As I walked to my car, I heard Frank tell another joke. I didn't hear a reaction. That night I told my wife, Sarah, what happened. She raised an eyebrow. "You're saying you can't hear people laugh?" Sarah asked, grinning. "Yes, exactly. I see them laugh but hear nothing," I replied, completely serious. Sarah gently shook her shoulders and smiled wide. I assumed it was a chuckle. "It's late. You're tired. Why don't we get some sleep and see if you hear anything tomorrow?" With that, we went to bed. But the next day, the laughter did not return, nor the day after, or the day after that. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed with my condition. I would watch comedy performances online, entranced by the eerie silence of the audience. I would eavesdrop on Sarah's phone calls with her friends, noting the occasional awkward gaps in conversation that followed a joke. Sarah grew increasingly concerned. The worst incident occurred at her birthday dinner in her favorite restaurant. My mind was strangely at peace, and I was happy to simply sit there and enjoy everyone's company. Sarah's sister, was telling some ridiculous story about her son misbehaving at school. Then, suddenly, everyone at the table burst into motion. The room went silent. My heart got stuck in my throat. I knew what was happening. I watched my wife throw her head back, mouth open wide in a huge meal. She shook as though something was alive inside her, clawing and clambering to get out. Her face crinkled with delight. Tremoring hysterically, Sarah's sister smacked the table with one arm, clutching her chest with the other. All I could hear was the thud of her arm landing on wood. Tears began to stream from everyone's eyes as they convulsed all around me, their laughter silent as the void. I should have been laughing with them. Instead, I sat there frozen in horror. The joyous occasion had turned into a hellish nightmare. That was the last time I saw Sarah smile. You see, when something disappears, however small, it can leave a bottomless pit in your world. A deep, gaping hole that will never be filled by anything else. If the hole is big enough, other things will begin to fall inside. That's how I lost my family, my friends, my wife. They all fell into the abyss that was left behind by the sound of laughter. Sarah called me crazy. She wept, trying with all her heart to understand what was wrong with me. I couldn't stand the sight of her. I kept replaying scenes in my head, where at her happiest moments, she looked like a monster. The love of my life, someone who once felt so warm and safe, suddenly made me shudder and freeze over with terror. Loneliness fell over me like a ghostly cloak. I lost contact with everyone. I learned to despise myself, to blame my fragile mind for dragging my life into ruin. I told myself that if I had simply tolerated these isolated incidents of laughter, I would still have my dearest people close to me. Of course, deep inside I knew this was impossible. I could not bear to look upon any of them again. All I could see was their sinister trembling, their shaking shoulders and their red, strained eyes. For years I could never understand what was wrong with me. Then there came a day when I stopped trying to. I started telling you this story in the afternoon. Now, as I finish, night has fallen. This night is darker than usual. I peer out my window and am confronted with black, endless void. My house is awfully still. I hear nothing but my occasional ragged breathing. I've grown old, and with each day I can feel my body turning on me. One of these days, I hope, morning would come, and I wouldn't wake. I would finally be free from my curse. However, retelling my story brought me immense relief. I felt young again. I remembered my family, my friends, my wife, their laughter. Perhaps I needed to get it off my chest. I'm tired now. My eyes are growing heavy. The world is about to fade into a dream. But then I hear it, a noise from somewhere on the other end of the house. I jolt awake. My heart thuds in my chest. My mind is racing. I listen again. There it is, a sound around the corner and down the hall. In the darkness, a deep, guttural sound. A sound I hadn't heard in decades. A laugh, thin, raspy, breathless. It grows louder, closer. They say you only miss something once it's taken from you. Sometimes it's better not to get it back. Story number 6. The guy moved in late last Saturday night. I know because I woke up near midnight to him ramming his U-Haul into the dumpster outside my bedroom. From my second-story window, I watched as he stepped out to inspect the damage. He was tall, almost as tall as the U-Haul. and when he put his hand on his hip, the gap between his arm and chest must have been big enough to fit a medicine ball. I considered going out to help him, but I really didn't want to open that can of worms. I went back to bed, reassuring myself that he'd probably appreciate my pretending I hadn't seen anything. There was a knock at my door early the next morning, and you can't imagine my surprise when I looked through the peephole to see that same man. Well, from the chest down. I only knew it was the same guy because I recognized the white button down. What the hell was he doing at my door at 6 a.m. on a Sunday morning? Did he see me watching him? Was he mad that I hadn't come out to help? I almost didn't answer, but I knew I'd have to face him eventually. I prepared an excuse before opening the door. He stepped back and released a wide, toothless smile. He looked sick. His skin was gray, and his lips were black. He extended his hand and said, "Let's hang out." No emotion, just the bare words, like Google Translate, except high-pitched and excited. A happy cartoon character. As a 6-foot-tall man, I craned my neck to look up at him. As I met his gaze, something came over me. A strange pleasure of familiarity, like I was back at my parents' house and my mom was baking cookies. I felt the urge to say yes. Simultaneously, I could appreciate the oddness. I didn't know this guy, even if part of me did. Somehow, I fought with myself, figuratively stepping in and out of the door as his smile never relented. "Not right now, Mikey," I said. I hesitated, then closed and locked the door. It wasn't until I was back in bed that I realized, how the hell did I know his name? But the memory faded like a dream. At first I was certain his name was Mikey, but by the time I fell asleep I was sure that I'd just thrown a random name out. Did I even know a Mikey? I woke up a few hours later and spent the day playing video games and watching Friends. I felt uneasy, but I've always had a bad taste in my mouth when it comes to Sundays. This weird feeling that it's going to be the last good day of my life. Like the next day is the end of all happiness and the start of eternal torture. Maybe I just hate my job more than most people. Around 5:30 a.m. Monday morning, there was another knock. "You gotta be fucking kidding me." "Seriously, dude?" I said, as I opened the door. He held both hands out, palms up as if presenting treasure. Atop them was the most beautiful pastry I've ever seen. It was fluffy like a cloud, but browned and crispy. It was drizzled with chocolate, peanut butter, and caramel. I reached for it and was bombarded with memories as I took the beauty into my hand. I was at Mikey's house. I was sitting at a wooden kitchen table as he frosted a beautiful cupcake, decorated to look like a rose. My mouth watered as he delivered it to me like a present. I sunk my teeth into it and sighed with relief. He was my best friend. I'd known him since childhood. I wanted to give him a hug, but at the same time my heart was rising in my throat, threatening to choke me as I had the feeling of people watching me from every angle. "Let's hang out," Mikey said, reaching for me. I took a step forward, the two sides of my brain fighting for control, and slammed the door shut. Looking down at my hands, I saw 2 pieces of bread with half a dozen crude slabs of peanut butter and jelly. Some on top of the sandwich, some underneath, and some on each side. It was like it was made by someone who didn't know what a sandwich was. I dropped it on the floor. At work, I couldn't keep my mind off him. As I sat at my desk, vaguely trying to edit the introduction to some algebra textbook, I was sure that I had never seen him before, but I had the memories of memories, like once in a dream within a dream from a different life centuries ago. We had been best friends. I fought my way through the day. I told myself I wasn't going to answer the door for him ever again. If I saw him, I'd run away. Under no circumstances would I look at him, talk to him, or touch him. I drove home. I wasn't 2 steps out of my car when he approached me. "Let's hang out," he said. I tried to turn away, but then my life was sunshine and rainbows. I couldn't help but smile. Without bending his back, he leaned his face down to mine. We locked eyes. I can't remember what they looked like, but I remember what they made me feel, what they made me remember. I was a toddler on a swing set. I was smiling and laughing. Behind me, the tall man, Mikey, was the one smiling as he pushed me again and again. Then it was my birthday. I watched as Mikey lit my candles. He sparked the lighter with his gray hands, his yellow nails longer than his fingers. On the baseball field, he was my coach. At school, he was my favorite teacher. I remembered me and Mikey sitting in the back seat of my car. There were butterflies in my chest. I leaned in and kissed his black, rotting lips. I felt disgust, but remembered love. "Let's hang out," he said, and then I was following him, because he was my everything. He was every good thing I could remember. But no, I didn't know him. I imagined walking into his apartment. I smiled, then screamed. I wanted to run away, but I'd miss him so much. We walked to his door as my mind screamed for me to run. He was reaching for the knob when some animalistic part of my brain took hold of me. I ran to my apartment and locked the door behind me. When I heard a knock, I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them there was a guy who kept knocking on my door and wouldn't stop no matter how many times I told him to go away. I watched from my bedroom window as the officer pulled up. I took a peek through my peephole and saw that Mikey was still there. I sat next to the door and waited. "Tommy, what's going on, man? Long time no see. Let's hang out." "Of course, man. I really can't thank you enough for last time." I looked through the peephole to see them walking away. A door opened and closed. Then I heard screams. I called out of work the next day, and a couple of police officers came by. I told them the truth, minus all the weird stuff. They knocked on every apartment, but nothing ever came of it. I'm pretty sure I heard some happy laughter and sounds of reunion when they knocked on Mikey's door. It's been a week since then, and I haven't left my apartment. I got fired, and I'm starting to run out of food. I know I'll have to leave eventually, but what happens if I run into him? Right now, I'm certain he's dangerous. But what will I think if I see him again? What will I say when he asks me to hang out? What will I remember? What will I do? Story number 7. No one ever really believes in the Loch Ness Monster anymore, do they? Since the first time it was introduced in a local newspaper in 1933, as a picture taken by 2 idiots and a really old camera, everyone and their mother has seen it. My question to you would be, how could a monster live for this long? I used to believe in Nessie when I was very young, watching TV shows like Monster Quest, which dragged in people to talk about the weird things they saw in the water. I loved everything sea monster, sea serpent, and dragon-like, until I committed the unfortunate act of growing up. A part of me still loves the idea, even now. But considering where I am right now, I wish I had just stayed the fuck home. This story will sound fantastical. It'll sound like a hoax. It'll be exactly what those Monster Quest idiots thought would sound like a really convincing story when they brought those country folks in and stuck them in front of a washed-out 90s TV camera. I'm writing to keep myself from hyperventilating down here, so hear me out. Never, and I mean never, go out on a massive body of water with zero knowledge on how to drive a motorboat. Just trust me. It'll get better. I promise that I meant absolutely no harm when I stole the motorboat from my gracious hosts when they went out for dinner together. I promise that I wasn't that high when I was out on the water. Now, I know what you're thinking. Something along the lines of, you probably had some weed laced with something stronger and tripped so hard you thought you saw something. What I experienced wasn't a trip. I wish it was. The high itself was nice. It was from just a bit of weed, baked lovingly into some of my favorite cookies. It was because of that mellow, calm feeling that made me feel that it made sense at the time that I could probably figure out how to drive a boat. People did it all the time, so why couldn't I? By the time I was on the water, I was experiencing some kind of euphoria. The moon was more beautiful than I had ever seen it, and its ivory light danced across the cold waters of the loch. I remembered thinking how my childhood self would be freaking out if she knew I was standing on a boat in the middle of the only place she had ever dreamed of seeing, for the sole purpose of catching a glimpse of Nessie. Nessie, the hoax. I sat down by the edge of the boat and watched the water, entranced, with my arm dangling over the side, skimming the glimmering surface with the tips of my fingers. The cold felt delicious, and the freedom I could feel in my veins injected me with a sort of childlike, romantic joy. About 5 feet away from my hand, watching me as from the water, was the large top half of a human face. I don't remember what I did or how I reacted. All I can clearly recall in my memory was how large it was. It looked like a giant's head. Its nose and mouth were concealed by the inky water, but the eyes and forehead were visible. It had hair so black it looked like the water it floated in, and I remember distinctly how the scent of an off-smelling perfume wafted over me. The eyes were... I couldn't for the life of me tell you what color they were, how they were shaped, or how big they were. It's like they've erased from my memory, and all I feel when I try to think of them is a sense of wrongness, and the knowledge that what I was looking at, I wasn't meant to see. I couldn't look away, though, and whether it was from fear or from fascination, I remember not being able to do much of anything other than stare with my heart in my throat. She wouldn't blink. I thought about how weird it was that she wasn't blinking, and then she spoke. It's been a while. I sputtered in surprise at the volume. It was like she was speaking in my ear, and only then did I break out of my paralysis and scramble backwards into the center of the boat. She didn't move from the water. She only stared at me with those fucked up eyes. "Do we know each other?" I asked, not having the slightest idea of what to say. "No," she replied, the voice still as if it were right in my ear. It was smooth and silky, comforting. Oddly enough, it reminded me of my mother, and my rapidly pounding heart relaxed. Whatever she was, she had an effect on me, and that alone should have sent the alarm bells ringing. But it didn't. I slowly approached the side of the boat and got to my knees, gripping the cold metal of the railing and shivering slightly. Whether it was from the chill or the circumstances, I don't know. It's kind of late to be out swimming. I tried, hoping beyond all hope that this was just a very tall, creepy Scotland native out for a dip. A delicate, tinkling laugh floated through my mind, and I realized that whatever this thing was, it was speaking to me through some kind of telepathic link. Or I might have been higher than a kite. I don't really know anymore. "It's kind of late to be out in a boat that doesn't belong to you," she replied. It felt like a good idea at the time. Does it feel like a good idea still? That depends on whether or not you're real. What does me being real have to do with the fact you stole a boat? Wait, how did you know this boat isn't mine? Again, the laugh echoed in my head, and I leaned further over the boat, getting used to the odd, wrong eyes that looked up at me from the inky waters. I know everything that goes on this lake, she explained very slowly. I know the man who this boat belongs to, and I know his wife. I know everyone that comes to visit, and I know everyone that lives here. Regulars to guests, to the animals that drink the fresh waters from the river that flows into the loch. How? I asked. It's a secret. What are you? That's also a secret. I'm good at keeping secrets, I attempted. No, you're not, the creature said with a smugness I could hear without the expression to match it. You're terrible at lying also, and you've waited your whole life to see something remarkable, haven't you? My body went stiff, and I felt the cold wind off the loch, seeping through my jacket and teasing my already bristling skin. There was a muted sense of absolute danger itching at the back of my skull, but whatever kind of spell I was under had me rooted there, and I knew it. But oddly enough, I didn't really seem to care. I still don't. I appear to the people who truly believe in something greater than themselves, she said, her wrong eyes boring into me. To the people with love in their hearts. The kind of people who want something extraordinary to exist, not because they want to have proof, but because they want to experience it, to believe in it. I didn't know what to say. Less and less have come by lately. You're Nessie, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears in comparison to the voice that spoke in my mind. I am what you believe me to be. If you're what I believe you to be, why aren't you a giant plesiosaur or a massive sea serpent? You grew up. I blinked at her, and then I felt my heart begin to race as the rest of her slowly rose out of the water. I wasn't entirely sure what I was seeing, and I'm not entirely sure of it now. It was like trying to make sense of an abstract art piece that looked like several things at once. I'll do my best without trying to sound insane, okay? Imagine the head of the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. Think Keira Knightley, or like Ana de Armas, and then connect it to the body of the biggest snake you've ever seen. Like a fucking jungle anaconda that'll swallow a crocodile, but instead of the big blotchy spots, it looks like it has the scales of a black dragon. I wasn't that high, I swear. Despite what I knew I was seeing, I couldn't deny that it was beautiful. The moonlight glinted off her scales and dazzled me with its brightness. My chest was hurting, and I couldn't tell if it was because of how heartbreakingly beautiful she was, or if I was terrified. In retrospect, I believe it was both. The eyes. The eyes. I remember the eyes holding me in place as the beautiful creature lowered itself to be eye level with me. What are you really? I asked, breathless. The creature didn't reply, but as she moved closer to me, all I could see were the eyes. I've been trapped here for centuries, she replied, her voice echoing through my mind like it was a wide open space. God, what color were her eyes? Bound to the water and forced to read the hearts of humans, to become their dreams, to embody their fears. Bound by what? I asked. My mouth hadn't moved, but still, the question was asked. Then she said something I can't remember. Maybe I don't want to remember. Maybe my brain is blocking it out so I can remain as sane as I can possibly be. But I don't know. What good sanity will do me anymore outside of writing this down? The thing she said sounded more like a picture than a word. And it was so horrible my body reacted viscerally. I might have thrown up, I might have passed out, but all I remember is the soft command to hold my breath. The next thing I knew, I was here, in the dark, with my waterproof phone and a whole lot of skeletons. There's an underwater cavern system at the bottom of Loch Ness. Did you guys know that? There's a fun little air pocket down here that this thing's been living in for a while. Like a teapot. Short and stout. God, there's a skull right next to me that I've been avoiding eye contact with, and I finally gave in just now. It's dark down here, and my phone is dying. Isn't that funny? It's always right before someone dies in the really scary horror movies that their last bit of light dies. Batteries go out, electricity gets cut off, phone lines go dead. There's no service at the bottom of Loch Ness, by the way, and it would be perfectly understandable if I wasn't about to fucking die down here. Who would I call? 9111. What's your emergency? Have I got a weird story for you? I don't want to die down here. She's out there hunting, but she'll be back soon. And I'll end up just like the rest of these people who were dragged down, just like me. There's no way out. Please. My name is Redacted, and my dad is Redacted. I live at Redacted, and I have 2 sweet cats who won't know where their mama is. Weirdly enough, just knowing that they won't know where I went makes me feel worse than the idea of my own mortality. I hear her. She's back. God, I hope it's quick. Her eyes are every color that's wrong in the world. Story number 8. I am one of the unlucky ones. I spent every moment among abled with this crippling feeling of unbelonging. Sure, I had friends in my senseless community. It was not enough. And maybe it was ungrateful of me. I couldn't contain this urge to be normal, connecting to the deepest level, seeing more than on the surface. Such a mundane thing for normal people. They would pity me for the lack of something I couldn't even comprehend. Endless ruminations of my mind were taking turns with a boring reality I had as a life. My sleepy older brother mumbled through the yawn. "Sun is sure grumpy today, isn't it?" What a typical way to describe weather for the abled ones. Seems just as usual warm today to me. A little cloudy, maybe, I replied with disinterest. My brother gave me an encouraging pat on the shoulder and said, "I'm sure the parietal implant will give you everything you need." The evening before the surgery, I couldn't brush off the uneasiness. The charming smell of Boscoro's dinner was my only distraction. Almost everyone would support my decision to get the parietal implant. It was recently patented and vigorously tested in private experiments, but not yet widespread for the public, though Boscoro would still be concerned about unnecessary risks. It was his last chance to change my mind. "It's going to be all right. I was waiting for this for so long. I can't just drop it," I argued. "It is never too late," he said, and let out a sigh. Sometimes it's hard to abandon your commitment. But are you truly sure if it is worth it? I didn't say anything. He knew I had already made up my mind. "Though it is ultimately your choice," he added, staring into the window. I didn't have to see his face to know he had that grumpy look. I wanted to see it through. It was chilling to my bone marrow. Yet I wanted to know the truth. I was meant to feel what I was ripped off from my birth. 20 years. I had spent 20 years of my life looking for patterns in these glances, and I failed to see any. As if sixth sense perception was so deeply embedded in every moment of your life, you can't pinpoint what makes it normal. Different from mine. I can admit that bitter envy is clouding my judgment. But if I don't see it through, then I will spend my years with doubts and regret. In the hospital's corridor, I heard a child's cry. which is common for sterile white rooms smelling of alcohol. A girl's parents were trying to soothe her as she left the cabinet rubbing her temples. Getting used to something entirely new cannot be easy. Though the younger the patients are, the bigger are the chances of success. "It'll get better in just a couple of hours." The familiar voice of my doctor rang through the door. It opened with an inviting creak. He picked up a new pair of gloves and put them on with a loud pop of plastic in preparation for testing my senses. The flashlight checked my vision. Common odors like coffee tested my sense of smell, and some other trials were commenced for taste, hearing, and skin touch. Following the final check before the procedure, the swirls of excitement and anxiety were drowning me, and my thoughts were rushing, failing to anchor to anything calming. Anesthesia finally let me have just a moment of peace. My memories after that were fuzzy and in odd order. I woke up in what felt like only a second of restless sleep. To my surprise, I felt only a little bit of nagging pain. I couldn't form any thoughts, and in that state they let me rest. I was disturbed by my doctor after 2 hours of a feverish nap. "Time to test," he eagerly said, and got a triangle. Its metal glittered in the sun rays. Reflections were painfully blinding due to the headache. Time was moving so excruciatingly slow, I couldn't wait for my honor. The doctor hit the triangle with a stick. It was silent. I looked at the doctor in confusion, since I could hear steps behind the door and the wind outside. He stared into my eyes, searching for a result. I shifted uncomfortably in the chair. "I hear nothing from this triangle. Is that normal?" I asked with caution. He rubbed his chin. "That is unusual, but not unheard of. Did you ever feel the sixth sense indirectly through other basic 5 senses? For example, blind can dream visually and discern light from darkness." "Even if I did, I won't be able to say specifically what," I replied. "Well, as you have been told already, the implant truly doesn't give you the sense. It helps you create new neural paths in your brain, so it can imitate the feeling for you. Not only it might take a while to get used to it, but I'm very sorry to say, in your case it is possible that it won't be as effective as it was expected to be at first. But we will see." I swallowed to ease the dry throat. There was a weird mix of relief and disappointment in my stomach. I knew about this possibility already, but it should have been enough to finally blend in. Though, and I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, I could almost feel the neuron paths being generated as the new information that I couldn't discern yet is being processed. The pain was minor. It was lingering in the background of my conscience. I finished dealing with the documents and the scheduling of the next checkup and went outside, under a dense barrage of clouds. I could see the spots of light and shadows running on the asphalt as clouds were passing by with immense speed. Not sure what got into me when I rushed under the cover of a cafe to avoid another trail of sun, just like when I was a kid messing around outdoors. When I could see clouds last enough to cover me all the way through to my home, I was relieved to get proper rest back home. It was barely 4 p.m. when I dropped onto my bed and fell asleep in an instant. I hoped I would sleep as if knocked out, but my dreams were a mess of unintelligible shapes and sounds. I felt so hot and uncomfortable. Delirium visions were afflicting my restless sleep. No position was right. No pillow was soft. Viscous fake awakenings were taking turns with vexing terrors. Scorching pain hit my ears. A roaring scream was tearing my mind apart. I jolted out of bed, and everything was rolling before my eyes as I was trying to find balance under unending torture. The screeching was unbearable. It took seconds, A negligible amount, usually, but painfully long in this moment. To get a hold of the situation and shut my ears with palms. It didn't get any quieter. My wide-opened eyes looked around in despair. Where is this torturous sound coming from, and why can I not possibly block it out even slightly? Sweat was covering my neck as I was panting from excruciating pain, still helplessly holding my hands on my ears in lack of anything else I could do. Headache was pulsating in my head, as if drills were rearranging my brain matter with each thrust of pain. I crawled whimpering to the corner of the room, trying to curl up in an embryo pose. My human intelligence regressed to the basic existence of a primitive creature that could feel nothing but this unending pain. My mind was blank for an unknown amount of time, and slowly, without being conscious about it, I came to my senses, and it was finally quiet. My body felt frozen, and it was scary to move. Almost if slight flick of a finger would bring torture back. I slowly opened my eyes and cautiously sat down, trying to process what had happened. One thing was clear. The scream I supposedly heard wasn't a sound. My thoughts were like lazy flies, rumbling, trying to get a hold of the whole picture. My mind felt like a sore body on the next day of the most extensive exercise. I felt somewhat like an animal that barely escaped a predator. Yet it was lurking. I had to think fast. Maybe it was some sort of case of synesthesia, an anomalous blending of the senses. Exactly. This is what the doctor was talking about, experiencing something through another sense. I rubbed my temple that was yet to completely recover from anesthesia. What input could make me hear such an awful noise? I got up with my legs slightly shaking. I felt utterly pale and exhausted, even though I had just woken up. I sighed and calmed down. It was morning, and the sun was leaving stripes on the floor and my bed through the curtains. I walked to the window to close them, in hope to resume my sleep and to deal with whatever that was later. I reached out, and sun rays hit my finger. A scream put sharp claws around my mind. I froze and gasped. Sounds were racing through my head. My thoughts were reduced to screaming once more. 2 seconds later, I flicked it away like from a burning stove in pain. The sun. I heard the sun. Third eye has opened, just to be met with blinding pain. I kneeled so I wouldn't be hit by sun rays, and my trembling hand closed the curtain with a struggle because of an uncomfortable angle. I collapsed right there on the floor under the windowsill. I was taking deep, comforting breaths, trying to sort out what had happened, what I felt. I clutched my finger in the palm, and instead of burning sensation, I heard echoes of the voices from far away. I came to the conclusion that the curtains were possibly moved by wind, and sun hit my face through the opening. This is what caused me immense torture. Does everyone with sixth sense feel the sun the same way? Or have I had an unsuccessful procedure with terrible complications? Truly, abled people are happy under the sun. They cherish it and share it with each other. One thing is certain, I need to get it fixed. I cannot imagine living avoiding the sun like some sort of vampire. Some legend might come after me and kill me in my sleep. I got up and started changing for an emergency doctor's visit. Danger wasn't immediate, and I wasn't sure if I could explain myself without being sent to a psychiatrist checkup. And so, I couldn't call an ambulance. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen with a few concerned messages from friends and family. What should I say? I was really insistent on getting this implant. It feels embarrassing to admit it wasn't a great idea after all. I decided to put it off worrying everyone until I'm sure it is serious and long-term. I copy-pasted, "I'm doing good, resting, getting a checkup today. Thanks for the concern," with slight changes to each person depending on my relationship with them. I put the phone down and started brainstorming how to cover all of my skin. I put on long clothes and gloves. At first, I thought that an umbrella should cover my face and neck, but the possibility of pain hit me like a whip. A vivid memory from long ago made me shudder. Once reflected light in my car's mirror hit me in the eyes, and it almost made me lose control of the vehicle. An umbrella is not safe enough. Is it appropriate in this situation to dress like I'm actually invisible? I have bandaged my face, put a scarf around my neck, and put sunglasses on. During that, I received a call on my phone and struggled to accept the call both mentally and physically. Physically, because the touchscreen is not responsive enough to my glove's material, and mentally, because it was Bascoro. "Hi, how are you?" I tried to speak as nonchalantly as possible. "Are you all right? The text you sent was weird," he deadpanned. I panicked, almost audibly. I couldn't possibly guess his reaction besides most likely justified scolding. "Yeah, everything is good. I'm going to the doctor right now for a checkup," I replied, with hopes my voice wasn't shaking. "All right, I'll be right there." Before I could even protest, he ended the call. You can't escape the inevitable. I was never so anxious about going outside before. When I opened the door to the street fully bright from sunlight, I was covered in goosebumps. There was no open skin. First step out. I became aware of the sun rays trying to penetrate through the pores of my clothes, but even if they were reaching anywhere, thankfully, I could barely feel it. If I heard something unusual, I could mix it up with the city noise. I was completely focused on the road, ignoring glances from passers-by. When I finally entered the clinic, Bascoro was already there. He was talking to a nurse, and she was visibly giving him a cold shoulder. I approached him carefully, trying to think of how to explain myself. Confusion and concern appeared at his usually steady face. "What happened?" he said with an indiscernible tone. I felt like something was stuck in my throat and realized I was on the verge of crying. If I say anything, absolutely anything, I would just burst down. "Hey, come here," he whispered softly as he slightly squeezed my arm to lead me to sit on the couch. He tried to look into my eyes through the dark lenses of my sunglasses. "What happened, Lise?" I felt as if I lost something important. A connection with people I've already had. And now, I'm stuck in this limbo between abled and senseless. I cried my heart out without saying anything. He waited for me to be able to talk. I took my glasses off since they were collecting tears and removed bandages from my mouth. I kept stuttering as he was patiently looking at me. I don't know. Something went terribly wrong, and I was in so much pain because I took a raspy breath. I heard the sun. I looked down at my shoes, expecting a response, but he was waiting for me to continue. "You are not going to lecture me. You were mad at me, weren't you? Since I told you about my plans, and you were right." He snorted. "Why are you hurting so much? You had no idea this could possibly happen." "Thank you," I said with a barely intelligible and trembling voice. "Thank me later when I'll make this place fix this nonsense." A mean-looking nurse heard me out while barely paying attention. She glanced at me with a mix of annoyance and disturbance. She took my measurements, suddenly swore, and walked off in a rush. I felt myself going increasingly pale. I was furious. The adult patients that were permitted to have experimental implants were possessing some sort of a curious pair of genes. One that would allow the sharpest sixth sense, and one that would apparently cause loss of sixth sense at the same time. Scientists wanted to find out why. The procedure was an enormous success, even if you don't agree with me right now. No, even if I remove the implant, neurons' connections have already been established, so you would keep your sixth sense. It has heightened activity and sensitivity compared to the general population. You should feel privileged and grateful. You might need to reassess your religion and your place here. What? I was baffled. Not to be disrespectful, but how is religion relevant here? Your attitude is the reason why it is so painful. Sun imagery is everywhere, in human history and religion. Saints, halos, personification of the sun, rituals and dances. What is the sun but not a god? Powerful beyond comprehension. In size, so unimaginably enormous, yet so far way out of human grasp. It will blind you if you dare look at it. It is life. It is death. It is a gentle touch of warmth and unbearable scorching heat. It can disappear to our doom at any moment, and it wouldn't be to anyone's surprise. Sun is not sentient, I said with a shaking voice. Do you think something capable of communication is not sentient? You spent your life in darkness, deaf to the call. People pitied you for your overwhelming ignorance, and now you want to go back to your intoxicating foolishness? Too late. Accept the gift and pray to listen closely to the sun. My blessing, my curse. I always hear it now. It is loud during the day when the sun is looming over my existence. It is quiet at night, where the moon is a pathetic reflection of the sun's light in its absence. I was going through life, oblivious to the overwhelming presence of the star. Everything I hear, feel, think is touched by the sun. It is an absolute peak of sun activity in its current 11-year cycle, and the highest peak since 1976. You survived, for now, but the shadows aren't done with you yet. If this story gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who dares to watch and comment your thoughts, especially if you're watching in the dark. Subscribe to Spectral, Shadows, where fear never sleeps, and the next nightmare is always waiting. We'll be watching.